There's one presentation that I've delivered consistently. It's one of my more popular ones.
Mhm.
Every time I deliver it, I change at least 5% of it
Okay.
because there's a better way to do that. Or
Mhm,
I'm thinking of how was that received? Did people
mhm,
understand it? So I'm thinking about the reactions to it, or maybe it's just updating some data, simplifying something. There's
mhm,
something that can be improved. Also, reading the room at the same time.
mhm,
I can give
mhm,
I
mhm,
could show the same slides, but we can have a completely different presentation depending upon how the room's reacting, how
mhm,
close we are, what
mhm,
size of group it is, what we're doing for activities. That's where your own creativity enables you to take that framework and make it better.
Building a website is, "Hey, ChatGPT, I needed a new website for blah, blah, blah," and then it just magically appears. Talk to me about building a website in 1996. Did I get it right?
In 96, 97, around there, yeah.
Welcome to the Your Message Received podcast. And now, taking your message to the finish line, your host, John Duffin.
Hey, folks, John Duffin here with Duffin Media. Welcome back to another episode of Your Message Received. Your Message Received is the home, the place, the platform to help you find your most true, best, authentic business voice. Heck, maybe it's just your authentic voice. Get what you want, find what you need, improve your results, make billions of dollars, meet the person of your dreams. That's what today's guest has promised us he's going to bring. May have heard that wrong, but at the very least, if it's not that, instead, we've got somebody on who I feel very confident walks the walk in regards to what they've been able to accomplish with their own arc to authenticity. So, Matt Bailey, who is today's guest, specializes in transforming expertise into engaging education. And this one factoid is the part that really resonated to me, that Matt has had over 1,500 keynote speakers and conference engagements, and happens to be one of the most in-demand speakers in the world as it relates to digital marketing. And so, Matt Bailey, I'm delighted that you made time for us today. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate the invitation, and already just looking forward to a good conversation already.
You and me both. You and me both. And listen, I'm delighted because, as I said, when I go right off the bat with, I want to start with more of a present tense conversation before I go backward. And I
Yeah.
want to ask, when you've spoken, the amount of times that you've spoken, how are you able to keep things fresh and engaging? Or do you? Or do you just go right into autopilot? And I'm guessing that answer is no. But my question, like, how do you stop yourself from just delivering yesterday's presentation?
Um, I would I would say on the whole, I let me back up. So there's one presentation that I have delivered probably, I would say for the last 6 years. Let's say
Yeah,
6, seven
yeah.
years. There's one presentation that I've delivered consistently. It's one of my more popular ones.
Mhm.
Every time I deliver it, I change at least 5% of it
Okay.
because there's a better way to do that. Or
Mhm,
I'm thinking of how was that received? Did people
mhm,
understand it? So I'm thinking about the reactions to it, or maybe it's just updating some data, simplifying something. There's
mhm,
something that can be improved.
mhm,
And I would say for the majority of time, I'm updating about that little bit of it. But then I find once I get into it,
mhm,
there is a level of autopilot
mhm,
that just you take it just takes over, and but yet it's also reading the room at the same time.
mhm,
I can give
mhm,
I
mhm,
could show the same slides, but we can have a completely different presentation depending upon how the room's reacting, how
mhm,
close we are, what
mhm,
size of group it is, what we're doing for activities. That's where your own creativity enables you to take that framework and make it better based on where you're at, who you're with, what the outcome is.
Do you still feel a level of excitement or nerves when you talk about that 5%? I'm always curious with somebody like that. As you're tweaking and shifting and going to that, do you still feel that sense of excitement?
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely, I do.
Yeah.
If I'm making it better,
Mhm. Yep.
that's what I feel like. I'm improving this. I'm refining it.
Mhm.
I'm taking out some of the complication and making it simpler. And just focusing it for the audience. And so, yeah, there's a level of excitement. And yeah, still, when I get in front of a group of people, there is all of a sudden it's there, ready to
Mhm.
go. I will tell you this, last week I had to give a presentation and I don't think the audience knew it. I felt horrible.
Oh,
I was
okay.
I
Okay.
was on the verge. I didn't
Mhm.
realize it, but I gave it the presentation. It was a 4-hour workshop. I
Mhm.
went right to the airport. And then on the flight home, I can feel this flu coming on. I could
Oh.
feel like, and then also just on a side note, I had
Mhm.
poison ivy as well. So I was miserable.
What?
Yeah. It's a downside of living out in a rural area and all that. So
Oh, we're
I,
gonna
I
get to that in a
yeah.
moment, but I was
So I
gonna
had I
say,
had the flu, I had poison ivy. It was probably the lowest I have felt. But as soon as I start, all that goes away.
that's what
And
I wanna hear.
yeah.
So, it's not a Pollyanna thing, and folks,
No.
for anyone watching and listening, that so many people are speaking, whether it is a part of their job, or speaking as an entrepreneur, or speaking about a new idea, or heck, if you're in front of somebody wanting a job or a promotion, you're speaking, and I loved when you just said a second ago, when it begins, everything else goes away.
Yeah.
And how long do you think it took you going backwards to get to
Oh,
a point where
yeah.
you could say, and everything else goes away?
So, being in digital marketing
Right.
back in 2002 was the first digital marketing conference I went to.
Mhm.
And it was a session on search engines, especially,
Yeah.
how search engines worked. And
Mhm.
there and this was like a small group of geeks. All right.
Mhm.
2002, I think Google
Right.
was just starting out.
Sure.
And someone from the platform said something, and there were people in the audience that audibly groaned and challenged the speaker. And I'm sitting there watching this like, "Whoa, you know, and now all of a sudden, it's wow, you better know
Mhm.
what you're saying
Mhm.
when this happens." So over the next couple of years, I
Mhm.
started doing more speaking, and as that conference increased, I started
Mhm.
doing more solo sessions and thing like that. But there
Right.
was always, and they call that the imposter syndrome. There's always that in the back of your brain that someone in the back is going to
Mhm.
stand up and
Mhm.
yell BS on you.
You're a fraud.
But one session, and this was a solo session, it was
Mhm.
a huge deal, and what I realized before I got up and talked was,
Mhm.
"Wait a minute. I am talking about a client that I worked on. I'm talking about data that I own,
Mhm.
that I analyzed, that I did the work, that I saw the results. I can show causality here, and if anyone were to stand up and say, 'Challenge me on it,'
Mhm.
and well, you don't have the data. You had no access to this project. What gives you the ability
Mhm.
to stand up and challenge me?" And
Mhm.
and that's when I realized, wait, this is mine. This is my
Mhm.
data, my information, my client. I am the expert in this. And if anyone were to challenge me,
Mhm.
yeah, let's go, because I've got the data and I can prove it. So at that moment is the time when I realize that I am the expert in what I am saying. Even and especially if I am presenting something from my experience where I have the data, I have the outcomes, I have the proof
Mm.
that this worked. Now, there might be some areas where you're presenting something a bit more controversial or something more where the data is available to other people,
Right.
but it really comes down to that confidence that if someone stands up, I can hold my own. And it's so I
Hmm.
think people try to eliminate the imposter syndrome by like trying to say I'm good enough or I deserve to be here. Yeah, absolutely. But can you hold your own if someone stands up and if you feel confident to say yes? That will take that imposter out immediately.
I love this. So, Matt, I'm going to take a couple steps backward,
All
folks.
right.
You didn't have the privilege that Matt and I had a couple of minutes before we went live, and I want to immediately go to what you were nice enough to share with me about the dad and and about your dad and the PC that was dumped on you in the '80s, because I'm thinking you've got this sense of I own. You were just saying a moment ago, I own the data, I have the causality, I know I own, but now walk me through the start point as we continue to get to know you. So,
Mhm.
when did your interest grow in the terms of digital marketing or just that sense? And was it when dad dumped that new computer on your desk or a refurb? I don't know
Oh,
if
he
it was
didn't
new.
he didn't give it to me, it was his. He he brought it home to
Sorry,
get
I
mail
misunderstood.
merged.
I'm
Yeah,
thinking, hey, son, here's your new
yeah.
big computer for
He had a home
$50,000.
office and brought that
Right.
Commodore 64,
Oh,
into
it.
yeah,
Loved
we're
it.
talking old days. This is
Yep.
dinosaur material. And so I would go into the office at night and, I wanna figure this thing out.
Mhm.
Yeah, I played games on it, but you had to learn how to work the operating system in order to
Mhm.
get to the games and but also there was additional things and I think there was one other person in high school who had a computer at home, and we were like, we got to go get a modem. So we went to Radio Shack and got a modem, and that was my exposure then to seeing news groups, seeing all this information online,
Mhm.
and at that point there wasn't a whole lot you could do with it. But
Right.
then what that enabled was down the road I was working in real estate. I had an
Mhm.
opportunity to start
Mhm.
listing commercial properties, especially hospitality properties. And this
Ah,
was
okay.
in the late 90s.
Mhm.
And I just sat down and said, well, I'm going to build a website. And it was just because of that experience and over the years, it was just, well, I'm just going to do that.
Hey,
And
Matt,
and so
before you continue, I just want to
yeah,
ask you, give me a timeline again as to when this is, when you say I'm going to build a website. When about was that?
probably 96, 97, 1997.
Here's why I ask. So, if we want to, and folks, if you're listening, watching our podcast in present tense, then it's at 2025, where at this point, building a website is, hey, ChatGPT, I needed a new website for blah, blah, blah. And then it just magically appears. Talk to me about building a website in 1996. Did I get it right?
In 96, 97, around there. Yeah.
Okay. So,
Yep. Wow.
what sort of
It
a brainiac are
was
you?
well, it was, when you come to real estate, commercial properties,
Right.
hospitality properties, you're limited to newspapers, magazines, the MLS system.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's not like today where you got Zillow, you got apps,
Yep.
you can see everything anywhere. Pre 2000, that was not possible. And so I'm like, the only way I can get exposure is to build some websites.
Okay.
And so yeah, I had to learn coding. Yes, I had, and there were some early what we call WYSIWYGs, where yeah, put the picture here, put the text here, make the
Hmm.
text this color.
Hmm.
But then I had to learn, well, how to make these websites usable,
Hmm.
how to use them to build leads, how to then market them so I get people who find them.
Hmm.
And that's when I realized, and here's where things just I don't know, they just work together. I went to college and learned journalism, and what it taught me is I don't want to work in journalism. But what it did teach me is how to lay out a web page:
Oh, wow.
headline, subheading, bullet points, call to action. Everything I learned in laying out a page applied to websites. And when you do it properly, you also rank well
Oh my
because you're
God.
using titles,
Right.
headlines, subheadings,
Hmm.
all those types of
Hmm.
things. And so people in my office kept saying, I did a search for real estate and you're number one. How'd you
Wow.
do that?
Right.
And so it was just I used my journalism knowledge, and that's how it sort of built and rolled from there. Um, then I had to learn analytics because I've got 2 hours in this evening, and where do I spend my time? What's gonna be the most profitable use of my time?
Mhm.
And that's when I learned the benefit of asking the right question.
Okay.
Not what's gonna bring me the most traffic, not what's going to get me the most leads, what's going to be the most profitable use of my time, and I couldn't answer that question. So that's where I had to learn analytics, it's where I had to learn sales processes, that's where I
Mhm.
had to
Mhm.
learn how all these things work together, and then that just those things together is what enabled me to get on a platform and
Mhm.
talk, because I was very, very early in connecting those things in
Right.
an industry, a growing industry of digital marketing.
When you just said it was such an eye opener for me when you literally just said, "Hey, I went to college, for journalism, and what I learned was I didn't wanna do journalism." But when you laid out the web page via a journalistic way, I was like, "Oh my god, that's
Yeah.
exactly what this is."
Mhm.
Uh, that's incredible to me, and I like so were you always growing up and up to this point, that's a lot of left brain and right brain, that there's a lot of both going on, where so many people are an either or.
Mhm.
So how were you able to navigate in that sense? Because I would think there's a little bit of a battle also going on as to what's more important in
Uh,
your own mind.
this is
I
well,
mean, the
and
creative and the analytics and all that stuff. How did you pull it together?
I was never great at math. I
Okay.
hated math,
Okay.
but I was good at telling stories.
Ah.
And this is where I have to defer to my upbringing of my
Yeah,
parents.
please.
My father was a pastor and my
Mhm.
mother was a teacher.
Okay.
And so, so my father, studied.
Mhm.
He broke things down. He was able to take passages, break them down, go to the original language, and basically take something complicated,
Mhm.
make it simple.
Got it.
That's what I learned from him. Same
Mhm.
thing from my mother in breaking things down to their smallest part,
Mhm.
put them back together in a simple way. So having that on both sides,
Mhm.
and then also my dad said I just never feared getting up in front of people. That was always a that was always an easy ability to have.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, but then putting things together and
Mhm.
and being able to explain things simply, and I'll be very honest,
Mhm.
I spoke with many, many brilliant, intelligent people, much smarter than me.
Okay.
What gave me the advantage is that I was more understandable. I wasn't more smarter,
Mhm.
I was simpler.
Mhm.
I was easier to understand, and that's what expanded my presence, that's what enabled me to grow, is that reputation of being clearer, of explaining things
Mhm. Mhm.
simpler, of being easier to understand. It had, and that's where I said, it's not that I'm brilliant. There's
Mhm.
many more many more people that are brilliant.
Right.
It's just I seek to understand, but
Mhm.
I wanna make it understandable to others.
How did you know that it was so important to speak to
That
other people way smarter than you?
that was the feedback, of people who enjoyed my speaking, enjoyed my
Mhm.
style, enjoyed all that. It was just something that I heard repetitively over and over and over, is like, "I finally understand it. I
Oh,
finally
forgive
get
me.
it."
That's
So
great.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's not what I meant to ask. I'm
Oh, I'm
sorry.
sorry, yeah.
No, my question was more, how did you know back then that it was so important to speak to people that were smarter than you? You said, "I spoke to people way smarter than me." A lot
Mhm.
of people don't, and that's why I'm saying that they take research and they just go, "How did you know that it was so important back then to go to people that are way smarter than you before you were able to then realize that you
Yeah.
were able to communicate way better?" But that
Um,
I find
well,
interesting.
part of that was the other speakers. The other speakers were
Okay,
brilliant, smarter
got it.
than me, and they
Yeah.
would present and I would understand what they're saying, but I would watch the crowd,
Mhm. Mhm.
and they would lose the crowd within minutes
Mhm.
because all of a sudden they're just at a different level, and they never made themselves accessible to the crowd.
Okay.
And I see some try, some don't care,
Mhm.
some just don't understand why they don't connect.
Mhm.
Um, and I think part of that, from my perspective, is I want to understand this.
Mm.
I need to understand this if I want to get better. And so that's where I would listen. But part of my brain would also be saying, oh, I'd say it this way. Oh, you know what?
Mhm.
You need an example here. You
Mhm.
need to break that apart. And so there was always sort of this secondary conversation going on in my head. And it even happens when I speak. As I'm
Yeah.
talking,
Yeah.
there's a background
Mhm.
conversation going on about I need to back up. I need to
Mhm.
stop.
Mhm.
I need to give an example here because I can see the looks. And so um that's I guess that, to answer your question, that's where
Definitely.
that came in.
That's really I feel like for anyone lucky enough to be watching or listening, that it's like that understanding that it really does matter, and you just said something. Was it always the case with you? I'm picturing what you just described, where there's a background conversation going on and all that stuff. So what I'm picturing was an example. I worked with a high performance coach, and they were talking about, a former athlete, and it was baseball player, and talking about the way that they are able to, because like the question, how are you able to hit a base hit, and now the speed of the pitch is like 101 or whatever, right? And it's their ability to be able to slow things down.
Yeah.
Did you always have that sort of trait that you could slow things down so that you can have a back conversation, or the ability to be able to think, "Oh, wait a minute, I'm gonna add a story right here,"
Mhm.
in real time?
Um, yeah, I would say, and I would say that's always been a part, but also I've learned to do it better.
Wow.
Um, there I look back probably like 20 years ago, and it was probably pretty raw.
Mhm.
I could catch myself lecturing just like everybody
Sure.
else.
Sure.
But part of that internal conversation is also realizing I can get better at this. I can
Mhm.
do better. I can, and that's always the how do I do this better? How do I make this
Mhm.
more dynamic? How
Mhm.
do I make this more
Mhm.
memorable? Those
Mhm.
types of things. Um, I'll give you an example. So
Please.
one of my uh, young woman, she was a client.
Mhm.
She was the marketing analytics director for a client of ours. Got to know each other really well, and then I brought her in to speak at an event
Mhm.
that you need to talk about what you've done.
Yep.
And she was very incredibly nervous. But
Yep.
I knew she could speak in front of people. I've watched her do it at her own company.
Mhm.
She's nervous, and I looked down, and she's got the note cards in her hand.
Mm.
And I asked her, I'm like, "You okay? You gonna be good?" She's like, "Yeah, I need to remember all these things." And then she looked at me and she says, "How can I be a better speaker?" And this is 5 minutes before we start.
Right. Right.
And I said, "Well, do you trust me?" And she said, "Yes, I do." And I reached over and took the note cards out of her hand. And I put them in my pocket and I said, "You know this.
Mhm.
Your slides are what's going to remind you what to say.
Mhm.
Go do."
Mhm.
And of course, there was like this moment of
Oh,
absolute shock and
panic.
fear and panic. Yeah, absolutely. Like,
Mm.
why'd you do that? How could you do that? Once she stood up,
Mhm.
once she started talking, you could just see all of a sudden that panic went away. And she said 90% of what was on the cards, but she didn't look at them. She looked at the
Mhm.
audience,
Mhm.
engaged, was
Mhm.
able to jump a couple of places
Mhm.
where she needed to, and then afterwards, oh, she was ecstatic,
Ah.
ecstatic. Just like that went so well. That was so amazing, and it was so
Mhm.
cool because this was probably about, oh my goodness, about 15 years ago, and
Mhm.
then about a month ago, she made a post on LinkedIn and just
Right?
out of nowhere thanked me, for for helping me further my career. And I'm like, wow. I'm like that little thing there is just, this. You have the confidence
Mm.
to stop using the crutch.
Hmm.
And that's all it took. It was she knew this stuff. She just needed to let herself knew that she knew it.
Ah, Matt, that's so kind and so freeing that you're able to do that. That's why it's so important that that the realization that these skills, not all of them, I'm not undermining you at all, but I mean, some of these skills are transferable. And I think it's really important to remember for other people so that it doesn't feel so quite so far away and removed that
Mhm.
you brought that person into a whole other level uh, by stealing her cards off of. Yeah, but still, the outcome was great. Now, folks, since this very beginning, couple of bits of information of why you would think Matt has become quite as confident. So, just as a heads up, Matt has taught, for example, Google employees how to use Google Analytics. And heck, you just heard the example of the groan from that speaker before. Experian how to present data. Um, Microsoft, Disney, Nationwide, Orange, Hewlett Packard, P&G, IBM. This is just a few overall. Now, you brought up a post recently, or part of, I'm sorry, yeah, um, that was relatively recent where you talk about marketers are failing at the fundamentals.
Mm.
Um, like one of your key mantras. When you have worked with all of these companies, do you see commonalities? Do you see a recurring series of strengths or things that need to be improved upon? What would you say that in the topic of that marketers are failing at the fundamentals, what have you seen that has changed for the better or worse, or that has remained a recurring problem?
You know, there is a common theme, and I do see it regardless of where I go. In
Mhm.
fact, um, and what it is this focus on tactics.
Ah, okay.
Tactics
Mhm.
have taken over marketing rather than strategy.
Mhm.
And I'll say strategy connected to business outcomes. And what happens when marketing is not connected to strategy or business outcomes
Mhm.
is marketing simply becomes an internal production department for social media.
Okay.
And this is what I see. And so,
Mhm.
failing at the fundamentals, and part of that was uh, I was an adjunct marketing instructor last semester, and I had a blast. I had a blast going back to the textbook and being able to tell kids, ignore this, ignore this.
Wow.
Here's the things we want to know. And we I did. I said, 90% of this book
Mhm.
you will forget because you're sophomores. You will forget this,
Oh,
but there
yeah.
are four things I want you to remember.
Okay.
And that's where we dug in. I said, this is marketing, these things. Research. What do you know about your customers? What do you know about the market? How do you do research? Where do you find research? So digging into those types of things.
Right.
But then also organizationally, what's the goal?
Mhm.
And how does marketing support that goal? And we support it through messaging. Well, messaging requires differentiation. How are we different from everybody? And positioning.
Mm.
Based on my message, how will you remember my company? What you associate when you see my brand,
Mhm.
when you see those things? And then how do I put that in a message? How do I communicate that?
Mhm.
Those are the fundamentals. When you don't have that, then it becomes I have to post 4 times a week.
Ah.
I have to,
Mhm. Mhm.
I have to create a video to support this. All kinds of things. And then also, what is significant in the field of marketing right now is everyone's measuring everything, but no one knows how to analyze the data. And around the world, regardless of the size of company, when I talk to people about analytics,
Mhm.
the number three questions are what's important? How do I get an insight from it?
Mhm.
And what do I do with it?
Hmm.
Those are basic questions.
Right.
But multinational to mid-size to
Mhm.
whatever, everyone's asking that same question. And a lot of it is because marketers aren't taught analytics. And if they are taught analytics at a university level, it's wrong.
Mhm.
They're teaching as if you had access to every bit of data in the world, which you don't.
No.
And so it's how do we do this? And so a lot of what I'm doing is, and then I won't say I'm not an analytics expert. I'm just teaching how I had to learn it, which
Right.
was let's break it down.
Mhm.
Are you supporting corporate objectives or
Mhm.
business objectives? What are the two big numbers you need to measure that move the needle on the objectives?
Mhm.
And then let's break that down. So that's where I'm finding that they're failing at the fundamentals
Mhm.
because engagement's easy to measure. Uh, the number of posts that I make is easy to measure.
Right.
We're substituting activity
Mhm.
for results.
I love the fact one of the things that I thought about when I was going through and before we began communicating before was one of the reasons I find what you're saying so compelling is because like I came from a field of digital broadcast television advertising. That's what I did for over 25 years. And I'm grateful. And this sounds so, I don't mean yay for me. I'm literally just saying I did it for over 25 years with some of the largest companies going. I'm
Mhm.
gonna ask you to repeat, and I got it, but I didn't, and then I'll finish that thought. But it was the 4 bullet points, and it was and I'm messing this up. It was the research something, the messaging
Differentiation,
wait a minute.
differentiation,
Research, differentiation,
positioning,
positioning,
and messaging.
and messaging. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think one of the reasons, thank you for repeating it, that did I find this great? And it's not pointing fingers, but one of the things that often occurred, and the larger the company, the more likely it was that it was going to occur, was that they were often in silos. Those departments
Yes.
were in silos. So the research people are the research people, and it doesn't mean that they didn't understand sales. I'm not saying that. I'm lucky that I work with some really gifted research people. However, the research information was provided. You took the research at face value and shoved it into your presentation. Um, Watched it, did it. So, I mean, in the beginning, I'm not going to act like but it was also the messaging came from different people. The salespeople sold. The executive leadership team had their key or their KPIs. And so every piece came and Matt, it was almost like the neighborhood I grew up in Philadelphia, where we were told in Northeast Philadelphia that we were so, diverse because we
Yeah.
had every nationality there. The problem was they all lived on different blocks separately. So it was like not so diverse. They just were all siloed. And the problem with
Hmm.
the silos is that it becomes a little bit competitive. And so one of the things that I find fascinating with this skill set, and my gosh, not just that you've identified it, but the truth is, folks, there are 4 different things that you could read. Just this is an example. An hour a day in 2011, wired to be wowed in 2015. Teach new dogs old tricks. I'm so grateful that you didn't say old dogs for me. And also digital marketing fundamentals. Do you think it's possible that when you were putting together those sorts of things and back to the journalism, I don't want to be a journalist, but knowing that you needed to do all of those and knowing to ask questions, was that the realization that all these people needed to cooperate or all these silos needed to cooperate somehow?
Oh, John, it's even simpler than that.
Oh,
It's
good. Because
it's
I made it
working
so
in
complicated.
yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
No, it's working in sales.
Yeah. Yep.
That's when
Yep.
when you go to college and you don't want to do what you learned in college, you go into
Mhm.
sales. And
What I
so,
did.
that's the real
Yep.
estate part of that.
Yep.
I did sales
Sure.
training
Mhm.
and that so the book you mentioned, Teach New Dogs Old Tricks,
Yep.
that is a result of my sales training because as I'm learning digital marketing,
Mhm.
the principles of why you would do certain things in digital marketing
Mhm.
are rooted in sales
Mhm.
because sales is about understanding people and communicating to them.
Mhm.
If, for example, one of the chapters in the book is don't muddy the water.
Mhm.
And this is a sales principle I learned that if I've got someone who's interested,
Mhm.
I can't keep shoveling more, here's
Yeah.
more benefits, here's more, they're
Oh.
interested. No,
Mhm.
now's when you reel them in.
Mhm.
Same thing when I design a web page. I'm going to design it in a way the further you scroll. If you click into something, I want to make this process as easy as possible. And so this teaches usability. It teaches remove things that aren't important,
Mhm.
keep them focused, move them through the process, and make it easier to do. Great example of this is I was working with the company, and everyone in the company is blaming the IT department because the
Sure.
website doesn't work.
Sure.
People aren't getting through the shopping cart. It's not working. And we tested it. And what we found, the shopping cart was bulletproof. I couldn't crash it. I couldn't break it. It worked.
Mhm.
But what I did go is when I went into that meeting, I asked all the other departments, how many of you have tried to buy something?
Mhm.
Rather than point the finger, have you gone in
Mhm.
and looked at the process?
Right.
Nobody had. I said, here's the problem. The IT department, your programmers, they created the shopping cart, but you know what they don't do?
Mhm.
They don't make things pretty and they don't write instructions.
Mhm.
That's your job.
Mhm.
Your job is to make the process pretty with clear instructions.
Mhm.
And as marketers, you should have been working hand in hand with
Mhm.
them to explain the process, make sure it's easy to understand and easy to do. That's all rooted in sales. Is
Mhm.
how do we people want to buy, we got to make it easy for them to buy. And so that's what the whole book was about, was taking all this
Love this.
sales
Yeah.
stuff and seeing it applies. It applies online. It applies how you communicate to people, how you present information, how do you move them through a process. That's where I learned
Mhm.
a lot of this process. And so then going from sales into marketing
Mhm.
and realizing, oh no, there's a division between these groups. And
Mhm.
for my part, I'm like, why? This makes no sense. And
Right.
so, I would say the first couple years of my speaking career was
Mhm.
making sales and marketing kiss and make up because you need
I
each other.
love this. You don't know. I am always biased. I came from sales, and I identify very much as a salesperson. Still do, right? And it was that sense that I you could sometimes hear out of, like, I was gonna say out of the corner of your ear, which I don't think exists, but what I was gonna say, that you could sometimes hear in the background somebody wanting to throw a shot at the salespeople. Like, all they do
Mhm.
is 3-hour lunches and travel to exotic locales. And you know what I mean? And it's like,
Yes.
but that ability to be able to bring people together, and whether it is you and the client or you and the executives or these divisions, you just said, finding a way that sales and marketing can kiss and make up. When you said that, I'm like, that's so much easier said than done, but critically important.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you're the old cliche, you're leaving money on the table,
Yep.
literally, and I love that. I wanna ask you, because it's not just, you brought it up earlier in regards to, different countries, and that there were so many commonalities. I want to ask you from a culture perspective, and from an understanding or a growth perspective. Look, you've had the, I'm going to say, great good fortune that you have been to a lot of places, instructing a lot of people. The UAE being one of those places, and I find, honest to God, that I've traveled, I've never been there, I'd love to, but I wanted to ask you is, have you found in terms of global business uh, similarities and differences in regards to both in terms of
Mm.
what we've been discussing from a marketing side, a sales side? What's it like traveling, like when you travel abroad? What have you learned?
Wow. Wow. Fantastic question. Now I got to think about this.
Sorry.
Um, this
Thank
is
you.
great. Every culture thinks they you'll like this, regardless of where I go. So where was it? In Spain, in
Mhm,
Germany, and
mhm,
in over a couple of months, I was in the
mhm.
UAE, Spain, Germany, the UK, and for a workshop, and people are getting there late, and invariably the director will turn to me and say, "Hey, it's just, it's kind of our culture. It's
Uh-huh,
an English
uh-huh.
thing. It's a German thing.
Right. Oh,
It's an
definitely a
Arabic
Spain
thing. We
thing.
all run late." And
Oh,
I had to
yeah.
say, "No, it's a human thing. It's
Mhm,
not
mhm.
it's not a
Yeah,
cultural thing."
absolutely.
That's part of it. But and what I absolutely love, if I'm in like Germany, Netherlands,
Mhm,
Belgium,
mhm.
you know, they don't ask, as was explained to me, they don't ask a question unless they know they're the first person in the world to ever think of that question. Um, so
There's a part of me that likes that, but anyway, keep going.
so if I can get them to ask a question, that is a victory. I take that out as a
Mhm,
victory.
mhm.
Um, it just everywhere I've been, people have just been incredibly gracious
That's
and
cool.
good.
Mhm,
And that is one thing as much as I travel, I still love coming back home.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
being able to see how other people live, being able even to live in some of these different places
Mhm.
temporarily has just been just eye-opening to see things and then be able to bring that perspective back home. That has been an absolutely rewarding experience.
I had a podcast, another podcast guest, and when she has done work with the UN, and so she travels extensively and all that sort of thing. One of the things she said, Morgan, if you're listening, and I hope so, shout out to you. The sense of there's so much more. It sounds so cliche, but as she learned, there's so much more in common in regards to when you were there. So much more. But I will ask you the same thing I asked Morgan, which was, what surprised you? In
What
addition to, say, the
surprised me?
lateness,
Wow.
to say, but what surprised you?
What surprised me? That
Yeah.
is great. You know what surprised me
Mhm.
is the way people look at the US as the
Mhm.
center of innovation.
Okay. Mhm.
That is what and I had to tell people, like, you can do this too.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's not just that people in Silicon Valley are smarter.
Right.
They have access to materials, but it doesn't mean that, the next social media platform can't come from Europe, the Middle East. And I explained to him what makes the US different is basically our size. Our size and
Mhm.
our GDP
Mhm.
is that something can happen just in the US and someone can be successful because the population, and we all speak the same language and it's generally
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
culture. I said, that's just part of where they are, but you've got the same creativity, you've got the
Mhm.
same, the skills. I've met people just, phenomenal in what they do.
Mhm.
Um, it's possible, and so that's been the biggest thing is just, letting their admiration of America is like, if I'm gonna get, it's the Frank Sinatra thing. If I'm gonna hit it there, I can do it anywhere. But it's like, no, you
Nice.
can do this. You can
Right.
do this here. You can develop this. In fact, it would be better if you did it homegrown
Mhm.
instead of looking to Silicon Valley as your goal. Develop it here, and so being able to work with people who are building great things,
Mhm.
that has
Mhm.
been rewarding. That has been absolutely phenomenal to see, just different ways of how people think, how they approach things, and just working with brilliant people has been a blast.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm pivoting real fast before I get to acknowledge you properly, but I am pivoting nonetheless. Isn't beekeeping dangerous? And if it is, why do you do it?
Not in the least.
It scares me. Just when I knew
Oh,
I
no.
saw that, I need to know. All I'm picturing is zzz, right? So walk me through how it's not dangerous.
Really, all you're doing, you're just kind of a landlord.
That's cool.
You're just kind of a landlord, and once in a while you got to check on them. It's probably a bit more work now than it was a couple decades ago because of mites and diseases and
Oh,
things like
okay,
that.
okay, right?
So I'm kind of waiting on a nice warm day. I'll probably treat them. I have the suit. Once in a while, I don't use gloves, and I'll get a sting on my hand. But I'll tell you what, the arthritis goes away for a couple weeks if you get a sting. So
Okay, duly noted, and nice, nice. What do the neighbors think?
neighbors love it.
Okay,
We
always
share honey.
fascinated by that,
Yeah,
right?
if we have a good harvest, we share it. But
Ah,
I do also try to educate my next door neighbors that the more you put chemicals on your lawn, the less the bees are going to be there. Um,
right, right.
so I'm trying to, but on the other side of me, the neighbors like, yeah, absolutely. And I explain to people that's why my lawn's got dandelions. It's why it's got clover. It's why we've
Mhm.
got all kinds of things because I'm feeding bees.
I think it's awesome. But as I said, I picture if I was like one of the cranky neighbors, I'm like, oh my God, they're all going to come and chase after me. But maybe
Yeah.
that's just my own ego.
We're in a
Uh,
little bit more of a rural area here,
okay,
so
right,
it's
right, right.
yeah, I can but yeah, when my neighbor did say she noticed, an increase in the amount of bees on her, hummingbird feeders. That's
Ah, okay. Well, listen, you're helping them with the environment overall.
right, yes.
Nice, and it sounds like you share in the honey, so I love that too. I got one more question for you, sir,
Yes,
which is
John.
this. You're a dad, you got 4 daughters. What would you say would be, since you got the great good fortune of having, a pastor and teacher guide you early on, what would you say of everything you've learned so far, or one or two of the most important things that you've gotten to share with your daughters?
Nothing is worth getting so angry about that you harm someone or
Mm,
say something. I have learned that I wouldn't say it's kind of a resilience, but it's also kind of a things happen, and they're
mm,
not necessarily about you.
mhm,
They're not necessarily about anything you've done. Just things happen,
mhm,
and being nice in the face of that
mm,
is going to net you better results
mm,
than a blind reaction. Um, that is the number one.
mm,
The number two is at this point, two of my oldest daughters, um, they had an interest in something. We developed the interest. We turned it into an LLC, built websites, and taught them how to build business beyond and make something out of their interest. And that's the piece of advice that I give to every college student I talk to, every
yep.
high school student I talk to. Start now.
Oh,
Build yourself a website. If just the skill of being able to do that
mhm,
is is great. But then if you're able to turn this into something where you can create a side income, a side stream of income, don't wait until you're hired by somebody to do this. You can teach yourself, you can learn, build something now.
mm,
And by the way, turn it into an LLC, learn the benefits of having that and go from there. But I love it when I see younger and younger uh, kids getting an interest in this and learning how to do it and learning the benefits of, I can create a side business. I can develop this and build that. And that's something that I have done with each of my daughters. We have encouraged the hobbies, the interests, and letting them find their own path.
I love the fact that this has become a multi-generational story for you, and I'm thrilled that you've gotten to share this with us. So I will have the SiteLogic website on the bio, so you don't have to start with WW. Not that you were going to, but I'm just going to say,
I appreciate that, John.
but,
Thank
but
you.
But what I don't want an audible groan that you described at the beginning of the episode with the person from Google. But what I would say is I'm honored that you are here. I think your storytelling, I've called it like data-driven storytelling, is magic. And I love the fact that you were able to bring so many facets of business and life together, and that they tend to synthesize beautifully. And I so appreciate the reminder that that is doable. You know,
Thank you, John. I appreciate that.
Matt Bailey, it has been an absolute pleasure. Is there anywhere else? Obviously, we'll have, as I said, we'll have the website in the bio. Anywhere else that you suggest that I send people, or that we get to send people to find out more about you?
Yeah, the website is the central hub, but also I have online courses where I coach people to learn digital marketing, everything from analytics to content development to presenting data.
Right.
And that is at learn.sitelogic.com. And that is that's my education site. Yeah. And so I personally walk people one-on-one through each of those subjects. Because I think most of online education is broken, and this is my attempt to fix it.
Well, listen, I've literally, as we're doing it, there you go, learn at SiteLogic.com. We find your courses. This is great. Honest to God. Just your energy makes me happy, too. Matt Bailey, thank you so much for showing up for me and showing up for us. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well, John. Thank you. This was a great conversation.
Thanks so much, folks. You've just heard another episode of Your Message Received. Keep liking, watching, sharing, listening, all the above. And we'll keep driving content through your front door. John Duffin, Duffin Media here. Have a great rest of the day, and we will talk soon. Bye.
And now, making its way across the finish line, Your Message Received has been a production of Duffin Media.